The first sign didn't come with thunder or light, but with silence and unnatural stillness that swept across the night sky as every satellite feed on Earth blinked out at the exact same second. People stepped outside, confused, staring upward at a moonlit sky that suddenly felt far too watchful. The world didn't know it yet, but the long-kept secret of the stars was about to be exposed, and it wouldn't begin with peace. It would begin with a message, one that had waited 6,000 years to be delivered. The transmission arrived like a cold whisper in every major language on Earth. No explanation, no negotiation. Only a declaration: the debt of the ancient war has come due. Most people didn't even understand what that meant. Governments scrambled, scientists argued. Historians searched for anything even remotely connected to some forgotten cosmic conflict. But while humanity panicked, the sky answered for them. A fleet massive, dark, and deliberate slipped into orbit like a clenched fist. What no one knew was that this wasn't the aliens' first visit. Their scouts had touched Earth long before humanity built its first cities. Back then, humans were barely more than survivors clinging to firelight. The invaders had seen potential in this small, fragile species, too much potential. So they left a warning carved into the hidden corners of the planet, a warning humans never learned to read. Now those same invaders had returned, convinced the time had come to finish what they started ages ago. But humanity wasn't the same frightened species they remembered, and that misunderstanding would become the aliens' first mistake. Across the world, the reaction wasn't fear, it was resolve. People gathered around screens, around radios, around each other, not because they thought they could win easily, but because something deep inside them refused to bend. There was a strange calm that settled over cities and villages alike, a feeling that if the universe wanted a fight, humanity would not step back. Not this time. In one quiet research outpost tucked into a mountain range, a small team stood at the center of the unfolding mystery. They had been studying odd traces buried in ancient ruined symbols that didn't match any human civilization. And now, those same symbols pulsed to life on their monitors, glowing exactly like the patterns on the alien ships above. To them, it felt less like an invasion and more like a puzzle finally unlocking itself. One member of the team, the calmest of them all, simply stared at the screen and whispered, "They've been here longer than our history." Another shook their head. "If this is a war from 6 millennia ago," they said quietly, "then we've been dragged into something we never even knew we were part of." But there was something else, something the aliens hadn't expected. For years, unnoticed by the outside world, this same team had been decoding the strange markings and discovering what they believed to be ancient human responses to alien threats. Human ancestors, far weaker than modern humanity, had somehow survived the first encounter, not by strength, not by technology, but by a stubborn refusal to disappear. That same spirit now spread across the world like a spark catching dry grass. Even as the alien ships cast long shadows over continents, humanity didn't collapse. Instead, pilots prepared aircraft, engineers reworked old prototypes, and researchers raced through dusty pages searching for anything at all that could explain how their ancestors stood firm against something so overwhelming. People who had never spoken to each other before were suddenly united. Borders felt meaningless compared to what hung above them, and in that unlikely unity, something powerful awakened. Broadcast towers came alive, lights blazed across cities. Humanity sent its own message, short, steady, and spoken in dozens of voices. "We are still here, we do not bow. We will face you." The response from orbit came instantly. A low hum rippled through the atmosphere, vibrating like a warning growl. Clouds swirled into spirals under the pressure of alien energy fields. For a moment, the sky seemed to tighten around the Earth itself. And then a single beam of light descended, not an attack, not yet, but a test. A challenge. As if the invaders wanted to see just how unshaken these evolved humans truly were. The team in the mountain outpost watched as the beam struck the distant horizon. Their instruments lit up with readings that made no sense, patterns matching the ancient carvings, echoing the forgotten war. And then one of them noticed a detail hidden deep in the data, a detail that didn't fit the alien signature at all. Something older, something human, their breath caught. Wait, this isn't just their war, they whispered. Someone from our side left something behind. But before they could share the discovery, the lights flickered, power failed, the screens went black, and every radio on Earth fell silent again. Something was coming through the clouds, something no one was prepared for. And it wasn't alien. The darkness that followed felt heavier than night. It wasn't just the loss of power, it was the sense that something ancient had awakened beneath the surface of everything people thought they understood. In the mountain outpost, the team stood completely still, listening to the soft crackle of dying circuits. The silence felt wrong, as if the very air was waiting. Outside, the sky flickered with faint colors blue, gold, and something like deep red, woven together in slow pulses. It wasn't lightning, it wasn't a weapon. It felt more like a signal rising from somewhere hidden within the earth itself. The team exchanged uneasy glances, each one knowing they were witnessing something connected to that forgotten war from 6,000 years ago. One of them stepped closer to the window, squinting through the shifting light. "This isn't coming from the ships," they said quietly. "It's coming from the ground. From us." No one wanted to believe that. Yet they all felt the truth creeping in. Far below, deep in the mountain stone, the research facility's older chambers hummed to life. These halls had been carved decades ago to investigate unexplained archaeological discoveries, strange fragments and markings that had never matched any known culture. Most of the world dismissed those findings as ancient myths or simple mysteries. But now, as lights glowed along walls untouched for years, the outpost team realized they had never been myths at all. With emergency lanterns in hand, they moved deeper into the lower chambers. Dust drifted through the beams of light as they walked, each step echoing through the long corridors. The air grew warmer the farther they went, as if the mountain itself was stirring. The lowest room, usually sealed and unlit, was glowing faintly, its walls covered in symbols that pulsed like a heartbeat. These markings were the same ones they had been studying for months, but now the lines seemed alive, spreading warmth through the stone. One member of the team reached out to touch the wall, but stopped when the glow brightened as though responding to their presence. "This is reacting to us," someone whispered. "It's been waiting." The moment they said that, fragments of old research clicked together in their minds. Long before modern history, humanity had survived the first encounter through something the invaders hadn't expected. Not magic, not forgotten technology. Something else, something the ruins described only as the echo. But no one knew what the echo actually was. The symbols on the wall shifted again, and this time, an outline formed, a shape that looked vaguely human, standing tall, face lifted as though defying the stars. Beneath it, more markings glowed, repeating a phrase the team had translated months earlier: "The Earth remembers." Above ground, the world was reacting to the strange lights in its own way. People gathered outside their homes, watching the skies shimmer. News broadcasts struggled to explain the phenomenon, calling it everything from atmospheric interference to a global anomaly. But the common feeling among viewers was the same: this wasn't alien. This was human. In several cities, old landmarks began glowing faintly with the same strange patterns. Carvings that had been forgotten, stone slabs sealed in museums, fragments buried under centuries of dust, each one lit with the same pulse of blue and gold. It was as if the past was rising, reminding humanity of something it had lost. Governments scrambled to make sense of it. Military satellites still offline, communication lines failing, leaders were forced to rely on half-complete information. Yet one thing was clear: the alien fleet hovering in orbit was observing, not attacking. Waiting, watching the strange lights that traveled across continents. As word spread, more clues emerged. Desert researchers found ancient tablets glowing under sandstorms. Arctic scientists saw icebergs crack open to reveal markings hidden for millennia. Everywhere the same message repeated itself in countless forgotten languages: do not bow. Do not forget. The mountain outpost team documented everything they could in notebooks, the old-fashioned way, since their devices were dead. They began piecing together a timeline, one that suggested the ancient war wasn't just a battle between humans and invaders. It seemed humanity had received help from something or someone else, Not alien, not human, something in between. But the deeper they dug, the more uneasy they became. Because some symbols weren't warnings, they were instructions, and a few of those instructions were incomplete. Back on the surface, the sky pulsed brighter, and a low vibration rolled across the land like the beginning of a storm. People clutched railings, tables, or anything steady as the ground trembled, not enough to break anything, but enough to feel deliberate. The alien ships shifted formation, their lights brightened. They weren't initiating an assault, they looked almost startled. In the outpost, the symbols on the wall suddenly dimmed, then brightened again as if responding to something approaching. The floor shook. Dust rained from the ceiling. The warm air turned cold. Something was moving through the mountain. Not breaking rock, not drilling, just arriving. One of the team members backed away, their lantern trembling in their hand. "That's not them," they whispered. "That's not the invaders." No one dared to breathe. Because whatever was coming was something even the aliens feared. The sound that rolled through the mountain wasn't a roar or a mechanical grind. It was softer, like a long breath escaping from deep within the stone. The team froze where they stood, lantern light shaking as they tried to understand what they were hearing. The glowing symbols on the wall flickered in rhythm with the strange sound, as if answering some unseen presence traveling toward them. Then the vibration faded, leaving a thick, uneasy quiet behind. Nobody spoke, nobody moved. The air itself felt suspended, waiting for something to reveal itself, but nothing emerged. The tunnel stayed empty, and the silence stretched until it became almost unbearable. Finally, one of the team members stepped forward, voice tight. "Whatever's moving, it's not coming through the tunnels. It's somewhere deeper than this. Maybe even under the chamber," another shook their head, "or above us." The readings didn't track direction, but there were no readings now. All their equipment was dead. The only clues came from the walls and the subtle shifts in the air, the same ancient tools humanity once relied on. Outside the mountain, the situation grew stranger by the hour. Across the globe, people reported hearing faint tones beneath the wind, like distant chimes rising from the ground. Animals behaved erratically. Old monuments resonated with a low hum. Yet the alien ships in orbit didn't fire, didn't retreat, didn't communicate at all. They simply held their silent vigil, watching humanity respond to something they clearly hadn't predicted. Inside the outpost, the team split into two groups. One stayed in the lower chamber, studying the pulses of light moving across the symbols. The others climbed back to the surface to see what was happening beyond the mountain. The group heading upward moved cautiously, lanterns cutting through the dark hallways. It wasn't just the blackout that frightened them, it was the sense that the mountain felt awake now. When they finally reached the outside platform, they stopped in stunned silence. The sky above them glowed with swirling patterns that matched the very markings in the chamber below. The lights stretched across the heavens like vast, shifting veins of color. They weren't natural, they weren't alien. They looked like a map, or maybe a memory unfolding across the sky. One of them whispered, "It's global. This is happening everywhere." They weren't wrong. Reports from emergency radio channels carried the same descriptions: temples glowing, seas shimmering with strange reflections, entire forests humming with faint energy. And through it all, humanity stood on edge, bracing for the invaders' attack that never came. The alien fleet, once intimidating in its silent dominance, seemed almost hesitant now, as if something older than them had stepped into the conflict. Back in the lower chamber, the glowing symbols shifted again, forming patterns the team had never seen before. One member sketched furiously, trying to keep up. Another paced in circles, trying to place a strange feeling forming at the edge of their thoughts. "It doesn't make sense," they muttered. Why would something buried on Earth react to the aliens' arrival unless it remembers them? The idea lingered heavily in the air. What if this wasn't just a defensive response? What if humanity wasn't as alone in its origins as it believed? While the main team dealt with the rising mystery, the world itself developed its own subplots. Pilots near military bases reported strange compass swings whenever they flew close to old ruins. Oceanic researchers discovered ancient structures under the water suddenly glowing with faint symbols. In a dense jungle, explorers stumbled upon a massive stone ring once dormant now humming so loudly birds refused to land nearby. Each discovery hinted at a truth long buried. Humanity had once been part of something far bigger, and that forgotten connection was reawakening. But with every new clue, fear grew as well. Civilians questioned whether these ancient forces were allies or something entirely unknown. Leaders struggled to unify their people when no one truly understood the threat. And in certain corners of the world, panic began to simmer as rumors spread that the Earth itself might be preparing for a conflict older than recorded history. Back in the mountain, the tension reached a new height. Without warning, the symbols on the chamber wall shifted into a final pattern symbol, clear and more unsettling than anything they had seen before. It was the outline of a massive object descending toward Earth, marked with a symbol that matched neither human nor alien origin. The team stared at it in stunned silence. One of them whispered, "This isn't a warning." Another breathed out, "It's a countdown." At that same moment, high above the planet, the alien fleet suddenly changed formation. Their ships spread out, lights dimming as though bracing for something unseen. They weren't preparing to attack Earth, they were preparing to defend themselves. And for the first time since the invasion began, the invaders looked afraid. Down in the mountain, the walls pulsed once more with a harsh blue light. The ground trembled violently, sending dust and small stones raining from above. Lanterns flickered, heartbeats raced, something was drawing near, not alien, not human. Something ancient enough that even the sky seemed to pull back in anticipation. And the countdown continued, each pulse echoing through the stone like a distant approaching footstep. The pulses in the mountain chamber grew sharper, almost like a heartbeat rising toward panic. Each glow stretched farther along the stone surface, lighting the room in an eerie blue haze. The team huddled together, notebooks pressed to their sides, breath tight in their chests. None of them dared to touch the walls now. The energy radiating from the symbols felt too alive, too aware. Outside, the sky darkened as the swirling lights overhead thickened into a massive pattern that stretched across the world like a net. It wasn't chaotic. It was structured, deliberate, as if someone or something was weaving a signal across the planet. The alien fleet, once a confident and overwhelming presence, began drifting out of its silent formation. Their ships trembled with faint ripples of light as though caught in a current they couldn't escape. From their vantage point on the mountain platform, the upper team watched the ships shift nervously in the sky. One of them gripped the railing with white knuckles. "They're scared," they whispered. "Look at them. They're trying to pull away from the planet." But the ships didn't move far. A massive force unseen but undeniable kept them hovering in place. The crew could tell by the way the engines flared and stuttered. The invaders were stuck, trapped in orbit by something stronger than their technology. The lower team had no idea what was happening above. They were frozen in the chamber, watching as the central symbol on the wall, the one shaped like a human figure, began to split apart, separating into thousands of smaller lights. These fragments swarmed outward, forming intricate patterns around the room like constellations collapsing into motion. One team member whispered, "It's indexing itself, like a memory trying to restore." "But why now?" another demanded. "Why wait until the invaders returned?" No one had an answer. All they knew was that the mountain was becoming something more than a research facility. It felt like the heart of something ancient waking up after millennia of sleep. The ground trembled again, this time harder. Dust burst from the ceiling. Stones cracked loose and clattered onto the chamber floor. Someone stumbled back, lanterns swaying wildly, casting long shadows across the glowing walls. Then, for a brief moment, everything went still, completely still. Even the dust hung suspended in the air as if gravity itself had paused. And in that frozen moment, a sound echoed through the stone, soft, mournful, and impossibly ancient. It wasn't a voice, not exactly. More like the memory of a voice repeating a tone that no human language could capture. It vibrated through bones, not ears, filling each person with the cold fear of being recognized by something unimaginably old. The countdown symbols pulsed faster. Above the mountain, the sky shifted again. The lights overhead gathered in a twisting spiral, turning like a great wheel slowly lowering itself toward Earth. Cities around the world watched in awe and terror as the spiral tightened, sending long shadows stretching across continents. Reports from scattered research stations crackled through emergency radios. Teams everywhere claimed to see ancient structures reacting, stone rings tilting, monoliths vibrating, entire cave networks lighting up like veins in the earth. It was as though the planet itself was preparing for something massive. And yet, the alien invaders still held their fire. They didn't move, didn't communicate, didn't dare interfere. The fear that radiated from their ships was almost palpable now. They weren't the predators anymore. They were prey caught in a storm older than their entire civilization. Back in the chamber, the symbols suddenly snapped into a new configuration, a perfect circle surrounding a single empty space in the center. As the team watched, the empty space began to fill with a faint shimmer. Something was being projected, or summoned. One of them stepped forward involuntarily, eyes wide. "This isn't a map," they breathed. "It's a door." The ground heaved violently. The circle brightened until it was almost too painful to look at. The shimmer grew into a swirling mass of light that stretched and folded inward like an opening tunnel. The air turned electric, snapping with energy that raised goosebumps along their arms. Above ground, the mountain itself began to glow from within. Jagged lines of blue light crawled up the stone like cracks in reality. The sky spiraled downward, clouds sucked into the swirling pattern overhead. The outpost team on the platform staggered as a wave of force blasted outward from the peak. Radios screamed with static. The wind whipped around them in violent gusts. The alien fleet recoiled, their ships rocking as if struck by invisible shockwaves. Somewhere across the world, a broadcast managed to break through on every surviving channel, a single repeating tone. Low, deep, rhythmic. The same tone the team had heard in the chamber. The tone of the echo. Back inside, the swirling doorway began to stabilize. The center of the light thickened, forming a silhouette. Humanoid but taller, broader, and wrapped in flickering lines that marked it as something far beyond human. Its outline wavered like a memory struggling to take shape. Someone in the room whispered, voice trembling, "We shouldn't be here." Another took a shaky step back. "It's coming through." The silhouette shifted closer. The chamber shook harder. Dust rained from every crack. Yet the figure didn't fully emerge. It paused at the threshold as though waiting for something, permission, recognition, a signal not yet given. And at that exact moment, the countdown on the walls reached its final symbol. The mountain roared. The sky cracked open with blinding light. And something vast and ancient stepped forward, almost but not yet crossing into the world. Everything held its breath. The climax was seconds away, suspended on the edge of a single pulse. The chamber shook so violently that the lanterns toppled and rolled across the stone floor. The figure standing at the threshold of the shimmering doorway flickered like a candle caught in a windstorm. For a heartbeat, it looked as if it would step through, completely cross into the human world, and bring with it whatever forgotten power had slept beneath the surface for 6,000 years. But then something changed. The symbols on the walls, which had been fixed in their final countdown shape, suddenly fractured, lines broke apart. Circles split. Entire sections of glowing patterns rearranged themselves with frantic speed, as if reacting to a threat even the chamber hadn't anticipated. The team stared in confusion and fear. "What is it doing?" one of them whispered. Before anyone could answer, the chamber darkened, not fully just enough to make the glowing doorway flicker. The silhouette inside staggered, its shape bending and distorting like it was fighting something pulling it back. "What's happening?" someone gasped. The air rippled with a high, sharp vibration that made every bone ache. The team clamped their hands over their ears, trying to block out the unbearable sound. But it wasn't coming from the walls this time. It was coming from the sky. Above the mountain, the alien fleet, momentarily frozen in fear, suddenly erupted with blinding white light. Their ships flared like stars going supernova. A thick beam of energy shot downward, but it wasn't aimed at Earth. It was aimed at something outside the atmosphere. Something invisible. Something they had been tracking since before they arrived. The beam struck nothing and yet everything. It rippled through the sky, spreading like a shockwave of pure distortion that made clouds twist apart like torn fabric. The spiral pattern overhead shattered, and for a moment the stars themselves looked like they were bending. On the mountain platform, the team above stumbled and held onto the railing as the sky rippled like water struck by a stone. A faint outline appeared for only a split second, something massive, stretching across the horizon like a shadow with no source. It wasn't a ship, it wasn't a creature. It was a shape older than both. The alien beam struggled against the distortion, but whatever lay hidden in the sky pushed back with equal force. The clash of energies lit the night with pulsing white and deep crimson streaks. It wasn't an attack, it was a warning. A warning aimed at the aliens. In the chamber below, the shimmering doorway flickered more violently. The figure inside twisted painfully, its form glitching apart before pulling back to reassemble itself. The glowing symbols on the walls flashed red for the first time, casting the entire room in a harsh, unsettling light. One of the researchers stumbled backward. "This isn't from the chamber," they breathed. "This isn't part of the countdown. Something's interfering from outside?" Another shook their head in disbelief. "But if it's not the invaders, then who?" The answer came in the form of a low, resonant hum that shook the entire facility. The floor vibrated. The stones vibrated, even the air vibrated. It was the same tone the world had been hearing, the echo, but now it was louder, sharper, unmistakably alive. The doorway snapped shut like a door slammed by unseen hands. The silhouette vanished completely. The chamber plunged into darkness before the symbols reignited in a furious pattern of red spirals that moved like a warning siren. Above the mountain, the sky cracked again, not with light but with shadow. The huge outline that had appeared for a second returned, more defined now. It stretched across the heavens like a colossal wing, though it wasn't made of flesh or metal. It was made of absence. A void shaped into something that almost resembled a being. The alien fleet panicked. Ships scattered, engines flaring wildly as they tried to reposition away from the shadow. Their formation fell apart in seconds. They fired blasts of energy into the void, but the blasts bent around the dark shape as if swallowed whole. The mountain platform team watched in horror. "The invaders aren't reacting to us," one of them whispered. "They're reacting to that." Down below, the chamber symbols flickered through ancient languages faster than anyone could read. But one symbol repeated again and again, a broken circle crossed by a jagged line. One of the researchers inhaled sharply. "I've seen that symbol in the ruins. It means rupture." The walls pulsed violently as if confirming it. A rupture between worlds. A rupture in the old war. A rupture in whatever was buried beneath earth. The energy in the chamber surged upward, blasting through the ceiling in a pillar of blue light that shot into the storming sky. The shadow above twisted at the impact, recoiling like something immense and living had been struck. The aliens fired again, their ships lighting up the heavens with beams that tore through clouds and atmosphere. But the shadow pushed forward, stretching wider, reaching downward with slow, deliberate intent. The ground trembled so hard that boulders came loose from the mountainside. The chamber surged with a rising hum. The sky cracked open in a spiral of darkness. And every alarmed human and alien screamed the same warning. Something far older than either species had awakened. And it was descending, not to save, not to destroy, but to finish what began 6,000 years ago. The mountain roared, the sky buckled, and the world braced as the true enemy revealed itself, still hidden, but close enough that even the stars seemed to dim. The shadow descending from the sky spread so wide it swallowed entire constellations. For a moment the world felt smaller, like the sky was folding inward around the mountains, the seas, the cities, and every frightened person staring upward. The alien fleet scattered in every direction, engines burning bright, desperate to escape the growing darkness. Yet not one ship could break free. The same unseen force holding them in orbit now pinned them in place, caught between the planet they feared and the entity they feared even more. Deep inside the mountain, the chamber reached its breaking point. The symbols flashed in frantic bursts, their light almost blinding. The team braced against the walls as the energy spiraled into the center of the room, forming a sphere that pulsed like a heartbeat. The floor cracked. Dust poured from the ceiling. One of them shouted something, but the roar drowned out every word. Then everything stopped. The chamber went silent, frozen mid-shake. The light sphere hovered weightless. The walls held their breath. Even the hum of the echo faded away. The team exchanged terrified looks. They knew this wasn't safety. It was the moment before something irreversible. Without warning, the sphere expanded in a sudden burst, stretching outward like a wave of clear air. It swept through the chamber, over the research team, through the mountain rock, and into the sky above. It passed through matter without breaking anything, but it carried a weight, an awakening. Above the mountain, the wave hit the shadow. For the first time, the colossal outline recoiled. The sky flickered like a dying light bulb. The mountains groaned. The alien ships jerked violently as the force pinning them weakened. Their lights surged, engines flaring to full power, but they still didn't flee. Instead, the aliens turned their ships toward Earth, forming a tight ring around the glowing mountain as if preparing for a final stand. On the platform outside, one of the researchers stared upward in shock. "They're protecting us," they whispered. "The invaders. They're trying to shield Earth." No one had ever expected humanity's enemies to become defenders, not even for a moment. But the aliens clearly understood the shadow better than any human ever could. They feared it. They had warned of a debt from an ancient war, but perhaps they weren't the collectors. Perhaps they were the ones running. Inside the chamber, the sphere of light collapsed suddenly into a thin beam that shot upward through the ceiling, leaving a perfect hole melted into the stone. It connected Earth to the sky like a column of energy, stabilizing as if guided by intention, and then the silhouette returned. The doorway that had closed earlier burst open again, but this time the figure stepped through fully. It wasn't a creature. It wasn't a ghost. It was a presence doll, luminous, shaped like a human but made of shifting lines and soft light. It didn't speak, but the air around it vibrated with meaning. The team felt the words rather than heard them. The echo endures. The figure raised one hand, and the beam of light connecting Earth to the sky strengthened. The shadow overhead shrieked, not audibly, but in a vibration that shook every atom in the air. It pulled back, twisted, and then lunged downward with overwhelming force. The alien ships fired in the same instant. Beams of energy lanced upward, striking the shadow with everything the alien technology could produce. Streaks of white fire cut across the sky. The shadow buckled, roaring through the atmosphere, but it didn't stop. It pushed through the assault, descending inch by inch as the aliens fought desperately to slow it. The figure in the chamber extended both arms. The mountain blazed with light. A shockwave erupted from the peak, exploding outward like a rippling dome. It pushed the shadow back, forced it upward, tearing long streaks of darkness from its form. The alien ship steadied, firing again. The world trembled as forces older than its own continents clashed in the sky. The shadow let out one final, furious pulse and shattered. Pieces of darkness spiraled into the atmosphere like fragments of night torn from the sky. The alien ships drifted backward, exhausted. The mountain light dimmed, the wind settled. The stars flickered back into place one by one. The figure in the chamber flickered too. Its form grew hazy, fading like a memory returning to rest. It turned toward the team, offering no warning, no prophecy, just a quiet sense of completion. Then it dissolved into a swirl of light that seeped into the walls, the stones, the very foundation of the mountain. The chamber fell silent. Outside, the alien fleet hovered uncertainly, their lights dim. After a long moment, the largest ship powered up and slowly drifted away from Earth's orbit. The others followed, scattering into the stars without a single broadcast, leaving behind only the faint hum of their retreat. Humanity watched them go, unsure whether the invaders left defeated, grateful, or simply terrified of what lay beneath the planet's surface. The world breathed for the first time in hours. But just when everyone believed it was over, the mountain rumbled one last time. Not with fear, with a whisper. A final message appeared across the chamber wall, glowing faintly. This was not the war. This was the reminder. And slowly, quietly, a new symbol formed beneath the words. One no human had ever seen. A countdown. Not ending, but beginning again. The chamber lights dimmed until only the new symbol remained, pulsing softly on the cracked stone wall. The countdown wasn't moving, not yet. It simply existed, quiet and patient, as if it had all the time in the world. The research team stared at it in exhausted silence, unsure whether to fear it or simply accept it. After everything they had witnessed, the alien invasion, the awakening of the echo, the shadow that tore the sky, opened this final message felt almost gentle. One of them stepped forward, running a shaky hand across their forehead. "It's not starting," they murmured. "It's waiting." The idea brought more relief than fear. For the first time since the mountain woke, the air didn't vibrate with danger. There was no rumbling ground, no glowing ceiling, no ancient force dragging itself into the world. Just silence, broken only by the slow breaths of people who had been pushed farther than they'd ever imagined. The team climbed out of the chamber carefully, using lanterns until they found spots where emergency lights had flickered back to life. By the time they reached the surface platform, the world had changed again. The sky was clear, no swirling lights, no cracking darkness, no alien ships. The stars looked almost ordinary, as if the universe had pressed reset. Yet the air felt different, lighter somehow. A weight lifted. A few members of the team sat on the cold stone, staring at the horizon. Morning sunlight crept over the mountains, washing the landscape in gold. For the first time in hours, someone laughed under their breath, half relief, half disbelief. "So, what now?" One of them asked. It was a fair question. The aliens were gone. The shadow had been shattered. The echo had retreated back into the mountain, but the world had seen everything. People across the globe had watched ancient structures glow, had heard the echo's tones, had seen the sky split open. There was no pretending it hadn't happened. Humanity had stepped into a story older than its own history. And yet, surprisingly, people weren't panicking. News reports crackled through handheld radios. Civilizations across the world were shaken, but calm. The aliens' retreat had signaled something important, that humanity wasn't as alone or as weak as anyone believed. The invaders had declared a war they didn't understand, and they had been stopped not by force or weapons, but by something human, something buried deep in Earth's past. Scientists everywhere scrambled to make sense of the events. Governments formed emergency committees to analyze the alien ships, the atmospheric distortions, the ancient ruins that lit up across continents. But the most important discussions didn't happen in offices or laboratories, they happened among ordinary people. Families wondered about their ancestors. Students asked teachers about ancient civilizations. People who had never cared much about the stars suddenly found themselves watching the night sky with a new kind of curiosity. The story grew, not as a tale of fear, but as a reminder that humanity had survived something it was never supposed to face. In the days that followed, the team in the mountain outpost became unlikely figures of global attention. They shared what they could without stirring panic, the symbols, the countdowns, the idea of the echo. They avoided giving names to the shadow or the luminous figure, because they didn't truly understand them either. They simply told the truth, that humanity had been part of an ancient conflict and had endured long after anyone expected it to. What surprised everyone most was how people reacted. Not with dread, with determination. Humanity didn't shrink from the truth, it rose to meet it. If there was another countdown somewhere in their future, then people wanted to be ready. Engineers studied alien technology left behind in scattered traces. Scholars pored over ruined carvings with new eyes. Travelers visited ancient sites not as tourists but as learners. The world didn't unite under fear, but under a shared purpose. The mountain outpost stayed active. New teams arrived, bringing fresh instruments and eager minds. But the original team often found themselves alone in the dawn hours, stepping back into the quiet chamber where the last message still pulsed faintly on the wall. One morning, as the sun rose like it had on the day everything changed, one of them touched the cold stone beneath the symbol and said softly, "Maybe this isn't a countdown to something terrible. Maybe it's a reminder to grow before the next chapter." It wasn't an answer, but it felt right. The true conflict had been resolved. The shadow was gone. The aliens had fled. The echo had left its warning. And humanity had survived again. But the twist wasn't the countdown of the vanished enemies. The twist was how people responded. Not with fear, with courage, with curiosity, with unity. As the team walked out of the chamber, the symbol glowed once soft, almost like acknowledgement, then faded to a gentle blue. The story of the ancient war was no longer just a forgotten whisper. It was a thread woven into the future. A reminder that humanity, no matter how small it once was, could stand unshaken against even the oldest forces in the universe. And somewhere above, beyond the reach of satellites or alien ships, the stars burned steady and bright as if watching, waiting, and perhaps even hoping that when the countdown finally began again, humanity would be ready.